Welcome back, everybody. I'm Nick Morgan, the founder of ICAN, Investor Choice Advocates Network, and the co-host of today's podcast, Capital Ideas, where we celebrate the ideas and innovations people come up with and the capital markets that make them happen.
And I'm Dara Albright. I'm the co-host of Capital Ideas and a proud board member of ICAN. And please join us in welcoming Etan Butler to the Capital Ideas podcast. Etan is the chairman of the Dalmore Group, a leading crowdfunding platform that has raised over $1.5 billion for businesses through Jobs Act exemptions. Dalmore is leading the charge, particularly in Reg A offerings, having captured nearly 50% of the entire Reg A Plus market. So great to have you on, Etan.
Yeah, great to be here, guys.
Awesome. So let's jump in. And my first question to you would be, how difficult would you say that it's been for private issuers to access capital in recent years?
Great question. I think it's always difficult to access capital. But fortunately, there's a lot more solutions that are and paths to capital that are available as a result of some of the Jobs Act exemptions. Specifically, now issuers have a path to be able to raise capital from pretty much anyone over the age of 18, right? Pretty much internationally as well, and to do so through marketing, obviously compliant marketing and promotion. And what that does is it shifts the approach to raising capital from a traditional investment banking model, which requires getting the interest of investment banks or approaching friends and families, into more taking that process on into your own hands. And how we provide that opportunity to issuers ultimately looks like them being able to place an invest button directly onto their website and market their product, market their offering in a similar way that the e-commerce industry works, utilizing technology, marketing, and then widening the lens of who could actually participate. And that's been pretty revolutionary.
Yeah, no, I love it. I don't think people understand that really you need marketing to have a market. And it's probably one of the most essential parts of doing a deal, taking a company public, raising capital. So maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the technology that you use to really maximize the success of an offering, particularly with respect to marketing.
Yeah, so to succeed in a crowdfund or an online capital raise, I think you really need three things. One is you need a solid operating business that's producing a quality investment opportunity that hopefully will pay off to investors. Whether you're raising capital on a one-off basis for a deal or whether you are a perpetual issuer, like a fund or issuing bonds, both require the operator, the founder, to have a quality product that people believe in and hopefully have a good experience participating in. The second thing you need is effective marketing and promotion, right? You could have the greatest opportunity, but you're an island on your own if you're not able to articulate that opportunity to the right people in the right ways. The third thing you need is world-class technology. Because you're raising capital from thousands of investors, hopefully, at relatively low investment minimums that are typically utilized through these exemptions. You need a lot of investors. You need a really strong technology in a similar way that an e-commerce company would run a campaign. So it's not just presenting the opportunity, it's giving investors the opportunity to express some level of interest and tracking that digitally so that you reappear in their feed and their social feeds, et cetera. You keep showing them where they left off from when they expressed an interest until hopefully completing an investment. There's a science that goes into how to present that opportunity so that they understand this is where you left off. Are you interested in continuing? You need to get people's attention because everyone's distracted and everyone's overwhelmed and everyone's looking at their iPhones all day and checking their emails and social feeds and getting distracted. You need to be a distractor. You need to get their attention ultimately. And there's a way to do that and there's a way to track that. And that's why the importance of technology is so critical. It's also critical to give them an intuitive experience to make that investment in a similar way that they're accustomed to working with other platforms that they use on a daily basis, like Amazon Prime or Instacart or things along those lines, where you really hone in to what are you expecting investors to see and be responsive to. One of the challenges for raising capital is that you're asking people for really sensitive information. What's your social? Are you accredited? That's a scary, that's a lot for someone to see an ad pop up and have to go through and complete. It's not just swipe up like Amazon Prime, one click and you're getting your thing delivered tomorrow. This is, you need to ask, there's some suitability related questions, there's some compliance that goes into it. So the key is, how do you make that process compliant, but also super efficient, so that the average American, younger generation that is, doesn't encounter unnecessary friction in that process. So the key is, how do you innovate so that it's compliant, but also really easy and intuitive to get through that process? And that's why technology is one of the reasons why technology is so important.
It sounds like, Etan, that you have devised an amazing system to deal with the regulatory complexity. So, I mean, you mentioned there's a variety of exemptions to the registration provisions, and each one comes with its own compliance requirements. What are some of the regulatory barriers you have encountered that seem to be particularly thorny? Are there areas that should be reformed on that score?
It's interesting. Always there's areas that should be reformed. Our model is more focused on what the regulations are and how do we innovate and establish best practice so that issuers have the best shot of being able to get through that process and most efficiently and successfully. I would say that for Reg D, there's you hire an attorney and you either utilize a broker dealer or not. You file the necessary forms, you get your private placement, and you could go and approach accredited investors. So I don't think there's much friction or challenge or things that necessarily have to be changed about launching a Reg D offering. Regulation CF is a step up, right? You need to file the Form C. There's a legal process, and in certain cases, there's accountant reviewed financials up to a certain level, and then there's audited financials you need. So that introduces financials and fresh financial information and audits that are required, and that could be a little thorny for folks that aren't accustomed to that. But it's a notice filing, ultimately a reg CF, right? So you're not going through a qualification process with the SEC where there's back and forth and some uncertainties that could result as through that process. Reg A, on the other hand, is a very different process, and that's where some issuers run into some thorny things because you're relying on the SEC to review, ask whatever questions that they may ask. And then respond ultimately with qualification before you're able to take your offering live, right? So that's something that's from a timing perspective that we've observed from time to time could create some issues. It's more from the continuity of raising capital perspective, right? So an issuer has a platform, let's say they're a perpetual issuer relying on the Reg A exemption. The risk for some of them is that, to get their offering requalified, you never know what you're going to run into. You never know what types of questions you're going to be asked. That's why it's really important to work with a really experienced securities counsel that has gone through the process of getting offerings qualified over and over again. And hopefully they've seen almost every potential issue that could come up. So proactively, they could structure things, they could prepare responses for different things or identify things that could be helpful to get through that process. Where if it's your first time or you're working with an attorney that might not have that level of experience, you may run into certain barriers along the way. And that's part of how we help advise clients, depending on what they're doing, what industry they're in, what their model is, who the appropriate attorneys might be that have, similar experience or what some of the challenges that we've observed. There are issues if you mention the word crypto right? There's issues with blockchain and tokenization and certain types of structures. So there's no way of an issuer knowing that necessarily unless someone's telling them what they've observed. And so that is, part of the process. And I think it relates more to the Reg A exemption than some of the others.
Interesting. Well, it sounds like whether it's Reg D, CF, A, it's important to have a valuable partner. And it sounds like you are filling that role for a lot of people. So thank you for doing that. And we'll have to keep an eye on you in the future and see what you're up to. So we really appreciate your time coming on Capital Ideas. Dara, as always, thank you. And for everybody else, you can go to icanlaw.org if you want more information about ICAN. Otherwise, we'll see you at the next Capital Ideas. Thank you.